No, because they say they're going to be listening for the jump.
Right, so it's around now. It's 9 in the morning. It's 9. Where are they? Are they in Berlin or in Mexico or somewhere else?
Near Berlin. Where?
What?
Somewhere near Berlin.
Oh, okay, so that's 9 o'clock in the morning. That's about right.
Yeah. Yes.
They went out early in the morning, so...
don't know about the girls, that if they die, they're just going to be there, stuck somewhere in this limbo.
But someone just said that you don't feel the falling.
Yeah, I've done it. Yeah, you don't really feel like you're falling. You just feel wind, like a fan feeling, like...
Right.
I wanted to feel the falling, so I tried to look at the horizon or like a cloud or something so I could feel myself in relation to space, like triangulating, so I would get the feeling. But it's hard to do if it's like a clear day. You just feel like you're...
I wanted to replay the fall.
Yeah.
But it's an illusion.
Yeah, totally.
See, if someone climbs up a mountain and they look down, they get this great view. Well, I've noticed that views high up aren't that great. They're normal, or it's okay, but it's not worth climbing up a mountain for. And you get the view anyways when you fly, so you ain't going to get me climbing up mountains to see a view. That's fucking boring, The eyes don't make it anymore. Zappa has on one of his early albums, Christmas doesn't make it anymore. Christmas doesn't make it. Well, the eye doesn't make it anymore. All that the eye offers.
But you feel your spatial size, and that's kind of interesting.
Well, that's proprioception then.
And,
you feel your
what did you
balance.
feel when you hit the ground?
Yeah.
Are you actually asking me?
No.
Yeah.
We're just sort of fucking with you.
I'm just reflecting.
We didn't mean that question. We're not interested in your answer. So you might as well go ahead and answer it.
Well, you'll never know because you guys won't do it.
There's no. I don't want. Can you sprain your ankle, or is it really easy to land?
No, it's really easy.
Yeah.
Did you use the square parachute? Was it the square parachute where you could control?
Yeah, it was like a rectangle, and then once you stop free falling, I think I free fell for like a minute. And then they have the parachute pull open, and then you're just like, oh, it's very nice and relaxing. And you just spend like 5 minutes, just kind of gliding down and whatever.
Did you wear some type of an alarm? Did you wear something to let you know when you should pull the cord, or was it automatic?
Oh, yeah.
What?
No, the person I'm with, I didn't go through the training, so I didn't jump alone. But the person you jump under. You're like attached to somebody there on your back, so then you're just underneath them, and they have elevation thing, so they know when to pull the parachute.
Oh, okay. So you've only done it once then with the partner.
Yeah, it made me want to do it alone, because I think the real thrill is when you actually jump off the plane, and not actually the feeling of the falling, But anyway.
So how did you feel when you landed? I mean, was it easy?
Yeah.
Because that would be kind of difficult if you're with someone else. How did you do that?
Yeah, they just have you lift your feet up, and you essentially just kind of like slide in like on your feet or just on your butt. Like as they slide onto the grass, you just kind of lift your legs up, and then they like very neatly just put you down on the ground. So, yeah.
Yeah, they said they want to do it alone because then you can like swim on the air and make turns and do things when you fall.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah.
It's pretty interesting how they have to move their hands as they're falling. Like very little minute movements like fins to make sure that they can like stay, in control. And, yeah. Well, that's cool your friends are doing that.
Yeah, it'd be great if we're doing it right now. If your friends were hearing this being described to them 5 minutes before they do it, and that'd be great. Good timing.
Yeah. Yeah, they wanted to scratch it with something, and they said they're going to have their handies there and be listening to a cheap radio. And I told them, I want to have some Zappa music, so.
Oh, wow, you better play some.
But, yes, I don't know exactly at what point they're going to jump. They say it around.
Were they attracted because you mentioned Zappa? They're interested in Zappa? That's how you got them interested in listening?
Yeah, and they say they had to distract themselves before, just not to think too much and be scared at work.
Right.
So I said, okay, if you're listening, I'm going to say
hello.
Something.
You can say hello.
Hope you don't die.
Hey, listen.
Don't be nervous.
That's a distraction with the list of Menippean satire. So it came up on the chat line. Someone was asking, what are Menippean satires? So I was denying most of them that people were mentioning. So I've got Eric's book on Menippean, one part of Menippean satire. He's got another book coming out right now where he fills out the rest of his PhD that he didn't publish in the first book. But the very first Menippean satire he lists is by Homer, and it's something called Margites, Margites. So that Homer wrote a Menippean satire, but nobody knows it. They only know the Iliad and the Odyssey. And got Varro from 116 to 27 BC. He wrote more than 600 Menippean satires. Then we have to get into what.
So what's the difference between Varronian and Menippean?
Right. Okay, we'll get into that in a minute. So the Dante's La Vita. Yeah. Okay, Dante, La Vita Nuova, Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, Erasmus's The Praise of Folly, Thomas More's Utopia, Rabelais' Gargantua and Pantagruel, Don Quixote by Cervantes, Giordano Bruno, various texts. The guy that McLuhan apparently did his PhD on, Thomas Nash, he did The Unfortunate Traveler. Kepler, the scientist Kepler, wrote a Menippean satire. See, they're pretty comprehensive. Yeah.
What's the name of it?
Kepler.
It says, a dream, comma, or the astronomy of the moon. That's what it's called, a dream, or the astronomy of the moon. And then the second one is a discourse with the sidereal messenger lately sent to mortals by Galileo. So Kepler is commenting on Galileo. A discourse with the sidereal, that would be the sun, right? The sun messenger lately sent to mortals by Galileo. It's something no one knows. A scientist writing that, but they were more comprehensive back then. They weren't so divided. The printing press hadn't fragmented everybody yet. Somebody talks about Shakespeare. Shakespeare's not listed, but Ben Jonson is. His satire is called News from the New World Discovered in the Moon. And that theater played in 1620. Robert Burton, The Anatomy of Melancholy. Isaac Walton, The Complete Angler. That's 1653. Alexander Pope, The Memoirs of the Extraordinary Life, Works, and Discoveries of Martinus Scriblerus. And that was written in collaboration with Jonathan Swift, Robert Harley, John Arbuthnot, and Alexander Pope, and Thomas Parnell and John Gay. So they were the scriblarians, I think they called themselves. And then Alexander Pope wrote something called The Art of Sinking in Poetry. Now, I said that Gulliver's Travels was not a Menippean satire. I stress A Tale of a Tub by Jonathan Swift. That's the Menippean satire. Tristram Shandy is a Menippean satire by Lawrence Stern. Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn. Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. Byron's Don Juan. Flaubert's Bouvard and Pécuchet. James Joyce's Dubliners, Exiles, Fitting His Wake, Ulysses. Pretty well everything that he wrote, except for The Portrait of the Artist, was a satire. Ezra Pound, The Cantos, is one. T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. Woody Allen, his movies, The Purple Rose of Cairo, Shadows and Fog, Mighty Aphrodite, and Zelig. Then look at this one, Orson Welles. His radio version of The War of the Worlds was a Menippean satire, according to Eric. John Fowles, people might have seen The French Lieutenant's Woman, that novel, that movie. Don DeLillo's White Noise. Italo Calvino, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler. If on a Winter's Night a Traveler, ... So basically, a Menippean satire is a fantastic journey to the moon where the person's describing their great trip, but every now and then says, I'm making all this up. Like he makes fun of the act of reading. He says, what an idiot you are, to read this thing. He'll say that in the middle of it. So he pokes at the reader. He's not poking at some politician or some virtuous person that needs to be ridiculed. He's ridiculing the reader. And that's why Eric says the Menippean satire changes its form in every technological era. It has to assume a different form. So is that why his list doesn't include Voltaire's Candide? You've got to move your mouth away from the mic. Say that again. Is that why his list doesn't include Voltaire's Candide? Right. That's considered Horatian satire. Horatio and some other guy, Juvenal, I think, were Roman people who set the model for that kind of political satire, people satire. But Menippean satire is not a satire of something out there. If you look in the dictionary, it'll say it's a mockery of ideas, and they're often very heavy philosophical discussions, but there's a level of absurdity presented to the discussions. And so that definition applied to Menippean satire, 500 years ago when people were getting new ideas from books. But Menippean satire changed its face as the newspaper came in, and then electric media, and then today. And so it shows up differently each phase. Now, Don Thiel, he's cooler in a way than Eric. In his book on McLuhan, he described Frank Zappa as a Menippean. And that's way back in 1971. That's pretty perceptive. But he was a student of McLuhan, so he learned from the best, and so he was able to see things. So Don Thiel makes the distinction between Veronian satire and Menippean satire. So Varro begins it. He discovers Menippus, who lived about 220 BC, and he was outrageous. He mixed prose and verse. They had to be kept quite separate, but he made them, mix them up. So mixing odd forms is one definition of Menippean satire. So Varro wrote some Menippean satires, and whenever scholars started to make the classification, and it seems to be John Dryden, he's about, 1650 to 1700. Oh, wait, he's got his dates here. No, it doesn't have his dates. So he's there around the time of Milton or just after. He writes an essay on Menippean satire, but he calls it Varronian satire. And he doesn't, I don't know if he doesn't know the name Menippeus or not. He maybe just knew Varro did it, so he called it Varronian satire. So then that ruled for hundreds of years. And then a Russian guy, Bakhtin, Bakhtin, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, somewhere in there, he wrote on Dostoevsky and Menippean satire. I don't know if he considered Dostoevsky a Menippean. So he popularized the word Menippean because one of those postmodern persons, Julia Kristeva out of Paris, she was a popular academic in the 60s, 70s. She wrote a translation or popularized Bakhtin. So that's how Menippean satire got back into the language, but it was pretty obscure. And Don, Thiel, and McLuhan were using the term Menippean satire in the 50s for themselves, but nobody, I don't think McLuhan mentioned the term. So Don Thiel comes along in the 90s to say that there's the Wyndham Lewis cynical satire, and then there's the hedonistic satire. So Don Thiel says that Joyce is more hedonistic than Lewis, and they're more into the pleasure of the senses. So Don says that's Varronian satire, and because McLuhan was a Catholic and supposedly moral and that, he wasn't going to be a hedonistic anarchist. So he is a cynical Catholic, or cynical about the activities of pagan. So McLuhan does Menippean satire, whereas Don Thiel in his books writes about other people who do Varronian satire. So Don, objecting to McLuhan's slight Victorian nature, says that at best Eric and Marshall are cynics and put on the cynical aspect of Menippean satire. But the hedonistic, multisensory celebration of the senses is what Joyce did, and that's Varronian satire. So it's a distinction made up by Don Thiel. But nobody knows the distinction. The phrase Menippean satire is just being popularized right now. People are hearing about it, and Eric's new book will popularize it. So we remain Menippean by being Varronian and mentioning something nobody knows.
And did you think Zappa was also Menippean or Varronian?
Well, that's, I would say
or
that
both.
Part, they're probably both, but you could say that Beefheart is more Menippean because he wouldn't, he didn't engage in the latest technologies as much as Frank did. So because Frank embraced all the new inventions and made new inventions himself, so he wallowed in the virtual sensorium, the technosensorium, not just the senses. He was a hedonistic with technologies and what you could do right today. He would be a Varronian satirist as opposed to Beefheart's Menippean. In the way Zappa celebrated all types of music, the most blatant brothel music kind of rhythms, and simple doo-wop. Menippeans wouldn't do that. Like Stockhausen might be a Menippean Roxy. Right? And he doesn't wallow in all the musical possibilities that Zappa does. So when you're talking to someone who knows nothing about Menippean satire, you just turn them on to Menippean satire. But when you meet a smart know-it-all, and they start talking about how they're a Menippean satirist, then you Menippeanize them by saying, "Well, Jesus, that's so 2018, where I'm a Veronian, which is 2042." That's so July. You're not even enjoying November 1st and turning back the clocks. That's where it's at. That's the now. We're in. You get that, Carol? You get that joke? Carol's there in her electronic vibrating chair. That's what that noise was. It was not me farting. That was Carol's big chair. Which makes all these squeaky noises. I have to live with this person who's always making noises. You know, the fucking blender thing goes on for 10 minutes. Now I got to put up with the squeaking chair behind me. Constant irritation. Is Carol a Veronian or a Menippean? What is Carol? Is she a Menippean? Is she trying to wake me up?
It's a sound artist.
She's both. Both.
Yeah, she's both. Wait, what did you say, Roxy? What did you just say?
It's a sound artist. It's part of the soundtrack.
Yes, for you people. Yes, it's all pleasant. You can take a Veronian attitude towards it, just wallow in the different sounds, but I gotta fucking hear you people, and it's always being drowned out by her noises. She just yelled out, "Not true."
Not true, and it's always very nice when she laughs on the background.
Yes, I think that's one of the most attractive things of Payday. She has a very nice laugh.
Yeah, totally.
And it sounds like she really likes me, doesn't it? Let's listen to it. No, she's got a good sense of humor. She knows how to play that laugh.
Somebody has to bring you your coffee and your cigarettes.
Yes, that's right.
Right now.
Yes, they do. Yep. I am an addict of those things.
You're forgetting your coconut juice, Bob.
Oh, yes. I got to go and get some coconut juice. Just a second. He does provide a few things for me, like popcorn. I have my popcorn. But, you know, it's not an extravagant buffet. It's very meager.
It keeps you talking.
Yes, it keeps me going. So basically, the grammarian Menippean satires, they had absurd words, bad punctuation, long words, and some people who knew Rabelais' writings, they said, "Oh, Joyce is influenced by Rabelais," but Joyce always denied it. He didn't know about Rabelais when he started writing in his...
Rabelais, he's always making exaggerations and lists of everything.
Right.
He's listing, for example, he ate this and this and this and this and this and this and this, and then he went and do this and this and this.
That's right. Endless list. And and also they have lots of sensory, disgusting vulgarity thing in there. Vulgar things, like people thought Ulysses was.
Farting.
Yeah. Probably picking noses. That's a disgusting thing to say, isn't it? Picking noses. We don't talk about that, do we? Did Carol laugh?
Or sex also.
See, I got one. If you guys don't laugh, I always have one person there keeping me going. She loves her role. She's a total supporter for the great man, but no one would know it because she appears to be greater. Because she covers her ass really well. Very complex. Very Menippean.
Well, thanks, Bob, for going through that. That helped a lot. Always kind of...
Right. Now, what you have to do next is get Theo's books and read them. That's where it's spelled out even better.
The other term that you use a lot that I find confusing is Gnostic or Gnosticism.
Yes. The basic point of Gnosticism is that they feel this is a fallen world and it's organized by a demon or a demiurge, and the idea is to somehow get out of the futile control of this world. I mean, you'll always be futile engaging it. So there's two ways. You can become a moral righteous kind of person who rises above the hoi polloi. So that would be tending to be a saint and a Puritan or a very pure kind of person. That's one way. That's the vertical symbolist method. And then the horizontal symbolism is you plunge into the world and hang out everywhere and obliterate yourself in the rabbit hole of sensory life. Those are the two types of manic Gnosticism.
And you've used it before because you say some people have called Ion Gnostic.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, if you start talking... There's other points in Gnosticism, like the idea that you are a divine being and you can become godlike. There's Orphism. There are different kinds of heresies. And so Gnosticism is a term for different exaggerated stuff about what you could do compared to the normal religions of history. And definitely, the Gnostic doesn't believe so much in a God. If there is a God, it's a bad God and made a bad world that traps people. So mysticism might be considered Gnosticism. When Mark Stallman heard what Ian was saying, yes, you were going to say something?
Yeah, going to the point of the Dominican satire, Zappa said God has a very weird sense of humor because he did this knowing what he was doing and he could not understand. He will say he only has a sense of humor and he must be laughing. Otherwise, I cannot understand what is this all about. What is this all about, Bob?
Okay, you were just saying you can't understand Zappa unless you understand.
No, Zappa said God must have a very weird sense of humor.
Oh. Because the world is so absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah? And you want me to explain that?
Well, that's why he was also explaining why he would make his cynical satire or his criticism.
What?
His use of humor to criticize.
Yes.
What he thought should be changed.
Okay, well, let's finish the mysticism thing. So, so Thomas Aquinas, he took on all the heresies, including the Gnostics. So the Catholic Church, he explained whatever he explained, and it gets more and more complicated, but it was acceptable to the Catholic Church to make him the church philosopher because he did not advocate you going into your own mystical sovereignty and Godhead and finding techniques to get mystical revelations and communicating with God. So we know that Ion says you are a God, you can ascend, sensory world is an illusion. 90% of what Ion says would lead someone like Mark Stallman, who used to work for LaRouche, and LaRouche has done a lot of writings against the Gnostic tradition. Mark would say that Ion is just like the evergreens in cosmic awareness, just doing Gnosticism. But if you listen closer to Ion, he can't even be categorized as that way because he celebrates our sensory life, the physical world. Mm-hmm. So an immature or a poor interpretation of Ion would say that Ion's Gnostic. But we know that Ion goes way beyond those categories and does not think this is the fallen world, does not do the traditional Gnostic stuff. So Mark misses the boat there on saying that Ion's a Gnostic. has a Gnostic philosophy. But you could look at all the different Gnostic heresies and sects are breadcrumbs, are aspects of the Ionic wisdom, but not as complete as Ion. Because Ion accepts the Thomas Aquinas, the rational view in that. Doesn't, says you can enjoy making your mind that way. That's okay. But Ion does have a radical agenda, because he says everything you ever heard was not wrong, but it's not going to help you. So Ion is here to start over again on the level of teaching, to, like he says, take you back to the source.
And so what is it with, in comparison, what is it that Ion and Aquinas have in common?
Ion and who?
Thomas Aquinas.
Thomas Aquinas has the doctrine of analogical proportionality, which is the ratio of the senses among the senses. And you'll see in Eric's other new book, the Sensus Communis, or Synesthesia, it's going to be all about Thomas Aquinas' doctrine of analogical proportionality, where a tactile understanding of the interplay of the senses and the different ratios caused by the environment. When you can see that action, McLuhan said that was the finest wisdom of all. That's the Zen Buddhism, Hinduism, Puritanism, Calvinism are all failures compared to Thomas Aquinas' doctrine of analogical proportionality. So it's pretty hard to explain other than when you're here and looking about you, you know this world's a metaphor. But when you're dead and looking at this world, that's a metaphor. Or the world you're looking at where you are when you're dead is a metaphor. So nothing is, it's a doctrine of not being fooled by your lying eyes. You're not celebrating what you see. You're not identifying with what you see, but you're not trying to escape your sensory life and go like a Gnostic, go for some white light of nirvana.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
I was walking around the water reservoir in New York City in 1994 explaining this to Carolyn. And she's laughing because she knows what I'm going to say. So we're walking around the reservoir, and other people are walking around jogging. It's a nice, pleasant afternoon. And I spelled it out really perfectly. So Carolyn stood up on the cement support for the mesh wire fence and said, "That's the most profound thing I've ever heard you say." And she never got over that hypnotic effect. She was hypnotized from that day on. She's never really tried to figure it out herself, but she was impressed with it so much that I got a compliment from her. Listen to her laughing. She loves it when I remember her life.
Well, that's an amazing statement coming. I mean, Thomas Aquinas is a saint in the Catholic Church, and that all Catholic schools are based on his teaching methods. So I'm shocked. You just shocked me.
Yeah, what are you shocked at? I don't know what you're shocked at.
That the Church would accept his teaching, his philosophy, that it doesn't fit into their narrow dogma.
No, you've got different phases of the Church. First of all, he that argument that he came up with defeated the Gnostics of his day. And that would be the Albigensian Crusade and the Da Vinci Code, all that history, the Merovingians and those guys down there in the Provençal prophets or poets, that region between Spain and the Pyrenees. Isn't that where the troubadours were? This whole troubadour thing and the Holy Blood, Holy Grail is
the Cathars.
Yes, the Cathars, Cathars. It's been a while since I thought of that. Yeah, the Cathars. So they had a big heresy, and the Da Vinci Code, that story celebrates the anti-Vatican gang that even they think the Templars were part of that rebelled against the church. And apparently Thomas Aquinas was the one who held it together by refuting whatever arguments these Manichaeans and Gnostics came up with. Now, probably Ion would support the Gnostics and Manichaeans because they advocated in individual sovereignty and going towards your own godhood. But because it was a doctrine in an early literate phase, it was probably all distorted and screwed up. So Ion wouldn't accept anybody. But you can see why the church would accept Thomas Aquinas. And when you really understand it deeply, it is better than Gnosticism. It's the philosophy you have after you've gone to the mountaintop and merged with the clear white light of stupidity and gone through the Bardos and Nirvana and whatever the Tibetans teach and all that stuff. When you land back in nowhere land, the doctrine of analogical proportionality, I can assure you, is the winner. It is a balanced use of the labyrinth of the mind. And it's the key to Joyce, and it's the key to McLuhan. And you'll see it. Probably you'll want to get Eric's book. I've read what he's written, what he would write in it many times through the years through Marshall's works. But Eric's probably going to do a nice replay of it and update it a bit. But it will, I assume, do a pretty good job in explaining the doctrine of analogical proportionality, at least as a book statement. I don't know if Eric can understand that Ion is the epitome of that and more, You'll see Ion is very balanced like that. The more you're familiar with Ion and all the twists and turns Ion does, he really is acting out the doctrine of analogical proportionality, but he would not agree to that because of its assumptions, because of what's associated with it. But once you understand say what I'm talking about as quadrophenia, you'll see that Ion does it. Like Ion would be the Thomas Aquinas of today. If Aquinas was balanced and rational, he came up with something that matched with visual space that was starting to come in just before the printing press. So a lot of Gnosticism is a retrieval of acoustic space, not liking visual environment, so they retrieve other sensory modalities. But Thomas Aquinas had the advantage because he accepted the visual space and what was coming as rationalism, and the church was building itself on literacy, so his was the philosophy to go with. But nowadays, that we're post-visual, post all the senses, and into what Ion's saying, it requires a new balanced position. And to the degree Thomas Aquinas was balanced, Ion is like Aquinas, very balanced.
Yeah. Wow. I'm going to read more about that. It's just very interesting. And
yeah, as a Catholic, it's interesting to know you had something going for you that your priests are not telling you.
Right, exactly. That's my point. That's like, wow, this is so different from anything that I ever experienced in going to Catholic schools and.
No. And remember, that's what McLuhan did. He infiltrated the Catholic world. He wrote papers on it. He says the Catholic is, as stupid as the Protestants. They don't understand the media biases and what's happening. And he would buttonhole priests on his campus, say, you don't understand Thomism. He would confront the Thomists on his campus with his new either refreshed Thomism or his Android meme Thomism, whatever. He was on a mission with a retrieval of the Thomas Aquinas sensibility, and he had a new version of it. So you find out about it. He's the only guy you can find out about it in the Catholic Church by reading him. Now, that's back in the 50s. There are people now, all kinds of different, updated by McLuhan, following generations that might be able to talk about what McLuhan was, but he was pretty unique back in the 50s. Mm-hmm. And then to relate it to Finning's Wake, that was a real act of genius.
Wow, yeah.
So Zappa grew up as a Catholic, and he may have been an unconscious Thomas Aquinas, because we read some quotes last week where he was saying, we've got to retrieve realistic values. And here's a guy acting like a maniac, but he's claiming he's retrieving realistic values. And you see that with his brother reporting how Frank was very young, very practical and rational and balanced. That's what the Evergreen said about Zappa in about 1980. They said Zappa was, and I never prompted this, they just said Zappa is one of the most balanced minds on the planet.
Wow.
But see, if you knew his public image, sitting on a toilet, rumored to eat shit in Fayetteville, Arkansas, all these disgusting, vulgar, Joycean things thrown at him, you wouldn't think he was a rational, balanced mind. But he was on duty.
So is that what you were saying earlier, that Zappa's public persona was vastly different from his private persona, much like you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Gail often would say that in interviews, point out that the image that Frank has out there is nowhere like what he is. And so she knew that.
Yeah, couldn't do drugs around him. His kids say he was pretty strict, really.
Not on the sexual part. They could bring their boyfriends and girlfriends and live there, stay there.
But they didn't. Moon, they asked Moon. Yeah, this is one of the interviews I just listened to, and they asked Moon after she was like 25 years old, and he said, "So you could have brought your boyfriend there?" And Frank said, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, I never did. I was too shy. I never did." So
that's right.
I mean, maybe she could have, but she never did. I don't know. I don't know about.
She wrote an article. She was a Hollywood star in her teens, in a few movies and this and that. But later, she got pissed off, and she wrote a couple magazine articles, and you might want to look for them. They're pretty interesting. She couldn't get gigs anymore because she had the name Zappa. So she resented her name and the images that people had of Zappa. She also, as a kid, didn't like these maniacs around the house who would be walk through the house with no clothes on. Whatever her personality was, she was not into wild, hedonistic behavior. She might have been more inclined to be an Apollonian vertical symbolist, a vertical Gnostic. So, she complains about hearing her parents making love and that. She's... and also not having enough time with Frank. And she presents a very unhappy childhood on some levels. I don't think it was completely, because she's pretty cool. She did Valley Girl and all that, She was pretty cool. Yeah. There's one interview I saw, she's about 14, and she's pretty neat there. But I don't know what happened to her later. I don't know her personality. And she wrote a novel making fun of her father and mother. So she was probably an old-fashioned intellectual, had a superiority complex, and no superiority complex kid is going to be hanging out with the boozers and fucking anything that moves. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's the way Roxana was. She was an Illuminati bitch, a queen, ice queen, wouldn't relate to anybody's partying. Right, Roxy?
I'm still there. What do you mean I was?
Yes, she still is. See how on the she and Moon would get along.
Yeah, they would.
But but that's Roxy had a good mind, was encouraged to have a good mind, had an art to study. An average teenager who doesn't have anything going for them, they're just going to enjoy hanging out with their buddies and going along with whatever happening, right? So they lose their virginity when they're 14. They take their acid trip when they're 15. They flunk history in grade 11. Then they get their shit together and drop their boyfriends and go to university and binge on alcohol for 3 years. That's the average American who has no talent. That's their life, right? You guys know what I mean? I've met a few of these people. I know what I'm talking about. Half of the Ionic audience is casualties.
We have homework to do.
That's right.
We didn't got lost on that.
Roxy was so extreme. I've never heard of this ever before. It's totally unique. A fucking 6-year-old putting her hand up saying, "What's for homework? Come on, give me my fucking homework. I want the homework." That is extreme.
I will say that to the teacher, "You forgot to give us homework." And she would look at me like, God.
Pissed off? thought that you would make work for her. And then they start the kids would corner her after to beat her up for causing homework, and then she started cracking jokes, outsmart them. And they'd all fall down laughing, and then she'd get the hell out of there.
I let them copy, and I did their homeworks.
You did their yeah.
But I survived.
Copy her stuff. You were like a cop in the middle of the mafia. You were an undercover agent. You had to go along with all the bad stuff they did. You helped them cheat and everything to keep your cover story. Correct? You agree with that statement?
Yes.
To hide the fact you all thought they were all idiots.
Yeah.
So what did we explain there? Oh, yeah, Thomas Aquinas. So, yeah, that's why it's fun to read McLuhan. I mean, he'll write about mysticism and these things, but there's a level of detachment from it. He knew all about it, and like his essay on Wyndham Lewis is pretty interesting. He would call Lewis a Gnostic, and he would explain why Lewis thought the artist was God intoxicated. So it's a really good exercise on reading something and not being trapped by the ideas, because you get to that detached X-ray vision that McLuhan had. And if that is the ultimate doctrine, there aren't too many people who can spell it out like that. So that makes him a pretty unique genius. And then to see it in the TV environment, to see that television was Thomistic, that's incredible.
Yeah, can you talk more about that? That's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, yeah.
Okay, you take a TV screen and think of it as your head. So you have a head and you look around. Now, take that action of a head looking around at things and put it outside of yourself. Put it on a table. So you're looking at an amputated head, and it's got sight, sound, and movement at least. It doesn't have technically smell, but, the movement of the camera, the mix of the eye and the ear. It's a perfectly orchestrated interplay of the basic sensory structure of consciousness. And it is outside of you, and then it becomes an environment. So a book is not tactile, a movie is not tactile, none of these technologies are tactile, but television is. So the tactile interplay, that is the doctrine of analogical proportionality, is an external environment. So that's how you can say TV is Thomistic. It's acting out, miming the perception of one who's mastered the doctrine of analogical proportionality. Because the TV camera is showing things, but it is not that. It is one step removed from what it is showing you. Right? It's a detached state. But it's not visual detachment. It's tactile detachment, which means it's very involved and yet not. It's contradictory, like tactility. So, did you get that, Roxy? Did you get what I said? Did it make sense?
I think it's very interesting what you said, that the TV is like the consciousness.
Yeah, it's consciousness. The extension, as McLuhan would say, the central nervous system. And the action of the tactile organ that forms the sensory data into a coherent experience. Your consciousness is coherent. So the TV screen replays that coherency right in front of you. You're watching something pick up sensory data with perfect perception. It receives the sound and the sight. It's modulated by color and different, whatever the TV's content is and what the tuning of the dials are, but it can be made to be very accurate simulation of what you experience through your brain.
And that's the only reason it's tactile, is because it's discarnate from you?
Yes, that's a big factor. Now, McLuhan said electricity itself is tactile. And since tactility is a bit of a mystery, the fact that, people say scientists and us can't explain electricity, that means it's near the tactile point. So telephones, radio, movies, all the automobile combustion, anything that uses electricity has tactility in it. But television is visual tactility. Radio is acoustic tactility. But with TV, you see. Now, because in the black and white TV, the cathode ray tube, your mind would make the image. Never presented a coherent an image there. Your brain partly made the TV screen. Now that's part of the tactile perception or consciousness. When you engage the world, you make sense. You're 50-50 with the world. It's presenting data, and then you project or mold it to your conditioning or whatever you are. That's what the TV screen does. The very process of making consciousness is in the TV screen.
Now, Ion said in the rewrite before 39, somewhere in there, he said everything is electricity, just like he says everything is frequency.
And that would be everything is tactility. Now, in the Bob Marshall session with Ion, he asked because he'd heard about tactility around me a lot, and maybe he thinks he understands it, but he asked, one of his first questions was really important. He said, is there tactility, sort of like as Bob would define it, but he didn't say that, but he might have meant that. He said, is there tactility in the non-physical world? And Ion said, no. Now, that's really interesting. But you notice that Ion talks about the engaged sensory human being. He defines tactility as contrast. So the interaction of bliss and contrast is the tactile drama, and that's why Ion will use the word tactility about our physical life every now and then. So he'll use it properly, but non-physical.
Yes, and I was thinking how the golf is this environment where we were just blissed out, and I think many people watching TV has this sort of blissed out.
Blissed out, right. It's not balanced. It's not balanced. The full physical dimension of perfection is balanced. You're not blissed out and you're not in pain, and you play with both of them probably. Best of all possible worlds. And that's what the Thomas vision is, the sense that this world is the best of all possible worlds because the perfect God made a perfect world, and any ideologies or religions that say this is an imperfect world is not Christ's message.
So would that same definition of tactility apply for being on your computer, on the Internet?
The computer, the screen is, the TV screen is a tactile light-through situation, whereas you look at a book, the light bounces off like a mirror. It bounces off the page. So there's a reflection part. But with television, the light's going right through the screen, right into your guts, McLuhan would say. But you could say go through your eyes and deep into your brain directly, and you become the screen. So the TV screen is tactile. Then you bring in the satellite and the computer, and you now have an interplay between all the media inside the proscenium arch of the satellite. So the interplay between the different media environments is a tactile interplay, whereas the TV screen is just the tactile sense within the content of TV with a tactile interplay. But when you get the whole global theater, mixing media and what Eric will call synesthesia, that's what prompted people to start taking psychedelic drugs. They were living in the 60s in a tactile media environment. So then the Android Mean comes along with the digital, and it shrinks the tactile environment tinier and tinier and tinier through the decades, till all that interplay is now in the palm of your hand and your iPhone. So the huge tactile interplay of the global theater gets reduced to a global tiny membrane, and because you can do all kinds of sight, sound, movement, you would say the iPhone is very tactile. But I think I take it further. I say that it is not an extension of you. the satellite was the last extension of us, being an extension of the planet. Then it created a tactile interplay between all the extensions of ourselves. Then all those extensions started to get miniaturized and took on a life of their own. So the android meme is tactile, but you're outside of that. You've been amputated. Your chemical body obsolete. So I wouldn't make it so simple to say we're in a tactile situation. The android meme is in a tactile situation. You're dangling ganglia. You're nowhere. And that's a pretty bad scene, and it's almost it's the fifth horseman, you could say, and it's leads to Antichrist and hell, and that's the role of Ion, to balance off the android mimic hellhole of tactility.
And that what you just described was the little man environment. Whereas Ion, when he talks about the chip body or the doing all the thinking for you so that we don't have to and we can go autonomic, that's the ascended man or ascending.
Yes, but it includes all the tactile extensions, it includes the android meme chip body tactility, and there's still an autonomy there. Because Ion says you can't resist any of these environments that are happening. That's not tactile. Tactile works with every sensory data that comes into the body. So a sovereign person is tactile in that it deals with all environments, can handle all environments, and not be seduced by them. So that's why Ion is a tactile expression. He oscillates between advocating you to drop everything, at the same time advocating you to accept everything or to get involved with everything. So he's got you going back and forth in simple dialectic terms, and that back and forth plus other dimensions is the heightened tactility that Ion represents.
Yeah, being very involved and yet not. That's very Ionic.
Yes. Right, and that's a simple, when you say that, I know you're visually biased, you have literate conditioning, industrial conditioning, so your images that you say with those words are inadequate to what you're really saying. So you need sensory training, you need to study Bob knowledge and all that I recommend to expand the images of what that meant, what you just said. Because it's not a simple statement.
And I was thinking that until now, I think, I'm not sure, medias were affecting only what we call the living. But then with Ion, also the environment of the Gulf was affected by this new media.
Now, there's an interesting point. The interplay between the dead world, the non-physical, and the physical, that's being altered by the action of Ion. So Ion is like a hypertactility that's playing off the Gulf world with the living world because it's another step removed. So that's pretty profound. I'm saying very profound stuff right now. Last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And so when you say, Leslie, I'm in the world but not of it, you've got an image of yourself as a chemical body. That's not adequate. You've got to have yourself as 5 bodies. So how does the 5 bodies be in the 5-bodied worlds and not of them? See, it's a lot more complex. And that's why Spinning Wake's a good training manual of getting you to think not so linear, not so monotone, and knowing it's showing different environments. And you get used to doing that by reading McLuhan, who's always talking about the different media environments. So the people I name in my chart, I say, is the best course to understand the sophistication of Ion.
But I have also said the 5 bodies are dead and buried, correct?
Okay, you're muffled again, Susanna.
Ion has said that the 5 bodies are dead and buried.
Yes, the tactile position would not identify with anything that Bob says, but he includes it at different times in analogical proportionality of figure-ground relationships based on who he's talking to and what they need to know. And you've got to understand my stuff to get what they mean, why they can dump the 5-bodied model. You know, you have to understand what they were. And you'll hear Ion say that occasionally. We will not tell you any, a simple answer to a question because you don't know what you're even asking about. So you have to sort of flounder around into the content of the question before you're going to be honored with an answer.
Right.
So you get that, Leslie? Your images that you have of me, I'm in this world but not for you, is very tiny compared to what you are actually made up of, technically, with the 5 bodies.
Yeah.
You got to practice living with the chip body and TV body, knowing you can't really visualize what it is.
Listening to Ion a lot, it really helps me because he changes so much.
Yeah.
Because he says one thing one time and the exact opposite the next. It gets you kind of used to not being attached to your thoughts and attached to... And I have to admit that I do that more than I read all the rest of the stuff, which I know I should.
No, but the point is you are getting training in the tactile flipping that Ion's manifesting, and what you just said you hear him doing. There's not many teachers who do that, who have the time to be around for 10,000 hours to show that that's what they're doing. You might have to take a course from somebody for 5 years, and I bet you if they started contradicting themselves, they wouldn't be very good at explaining it. But Ion is like, you can't find them, you can't pin them down, you can't arrest them. So he's there miming tactility in the verbal medium, constantly. And so that's the best example, the best form of teaching. Because, what you've realized he's doing, that's important to get. Because he's doing both, and when he speaks, he got naturally one side. So he has to include the other side to be the both. And then the and is showing up every week and keep pushing it and making new patterns that you get confused by or thrilled by. That's the and part of Ion. Knowing the both is not the whole score of existence. There's the endless production of new that comes under the word and. See?
Yep.
Listen, I think, our body, the MITSAC is working without us really knowing what's going on with all the 12 systems. Or at least they say there are 12 systems working. But the body goes on. The body knows how to function and to regenerate.
Yeah.
And we might not understand all these aspects of the magnetism, the polarities, and the frequencies, but these things are still there and are working on their own. So you don't have to get anxious of not getting it or not understanding what Bob or Ian are saying or because these things are working on their own anyway.
Right. In some ways, no wisdom has shown up that's expressing the autonomic values. Ion is like the autonomic system speaking and describing its reality. We take care of everything. We're source energy. You don't have to worry about it. We'll keep the blood flowing and all the other parts of the autonomic system. He actually is anthropomorphic. You project a human thing into Ion. Well, we can project the human interior landscape onto Ion. He's speaking from the perspective of the autonomic system. I don't think anybody's ever done that. Joyce tried to show it in a book form. River Run, the first word. That's your autonomic system moving. And it's not just moving, it's also switching on and off. So it's non-movement on a page of Finney's Wake also. So you're very lucky people to hear this. Nobody knows what I'm talking about. Nobody can say.
Nobody knows.
Eric knows it, but he's not performing in public that much. And you see, the way we present this show is a tactile thing. We're all over the place, and yet we're not thrown by it. We are anything, anywhere, anytime at all for no reason. Especially when Ion's here. You know, it's like if you think back of a payday, a full payday, you might have the image of a lot of noise and chaos and partying and anarchy, but underneath it all is the solidity of Ion. You know what I mean? The rock.
Yes.
Like if you watch Ginsberg do Howl or look at the Sex Pistols or anybody who puts on a wild anarchistic show, you don't know if they're fucking nuts or not. But there's always a solidity in Ion underneath it all. And that you'd say, no, that Ion's not nuts, right? It's not unbalanced. Look at the way he interacted with Steve at the beginning of the latest rewrite. That's pretty entertaining, powerful, and funny, what was going on there. Like Ion, Steve thought he was making certain points, and Ion said, no, you didn't even get this point. And we have to keep listening to find out the point that Ion was making that Steve wasn't getting.
Ion seemed to be having fun with that. I'm not sure about
It's always
Steve.
fun. Yeah, because they don't mean it personally.
Yeah.
They're talking to your mind, to the cancer virus in your skull, the demon in your skull. And they're jousting with it. And it's a game because it doesn't matter how much you get it, because you're eternal anyways. There's no problem no matter what drama you get into. If you believe that you survive death or that there is no death.
Yes, and I suppose there are many levels of communication, not only the fact that they're talking.
Right.
I'm sure there are many things going on besides that, the words.
Right. That's the non-physical talking to your non-physical. It was the bigger work being done in a private session with Ion. That's why people would feel changed, blissed out, all kinds of things after a simple hour of engaging Ion, because he was massaging other parts of themselves. Maybe like slamming a Niagara Falls of neutrinos through the nostril, like Zappa's metaphor, nasal drone mechanism. Expanding the skull with neutrinos. Someone whistled? Did you hear that?
Is there a bird maybe behind on the background?
Maybe in someone's house.
Hey, let's talk about neutrinos.
Well, that's Ion saying it's already happened. The neutrino is the anthropomorphic physical projection of a particle that acts out with a situation that's not a particle. Not even a wavicle, which is wave and particle.
Yes, because everything we can see is already passé. It's already in the past.
I distinctly remember in that the first rewrite of the second group. No, it was the first group. It was the rewrite you played of the first group, and the neutrinos came up, and Ion said that neutrino can reverse your godhood or something like that.
It's a neutron.
So,
it's a neutron, not the neutrino.
I think is that the neutron or the neutrino?
The neutron.
Oh,
neutron.
I'm mixing up my particles then.
Yeah.
Never mind. So was in Utah.
But, Bob,
okay.
Talking about, I'm not sure about neutrinos, but there was something in one of the rewrites that jumped out that ions. Bob was joking and Ion joked that they were created tachyonically before 2009. Did anyone hear that?
Is that the exact words?
Yes.
That we were interacting before 2009.
No, they said Ion said that they. I'm gonna check my notes real quick. But they mentioned that they were created tachyonically before. You were asking them questions. You were asking them, and Ion said that they were creating tachyonically before they jumped on the scene in 2009.
Yeah. There's some, they have said, I've mentioned this before, you might remember it, that I put a time thing on it. And they said basically we were watching and interacting with you three about a year before. And see, remember, 6 months before Ion comes through on March 18th, JW is telling us, I'm getting all these ideas. I have a desire to write things down. I'm getting all these. So he was getting impressed. His mind took it as ideas. Ion was starting to sink into him, sink its claws into him. And he interpreted that. He didn't know where they're coming from, but he had to start writing books. So that was the first project. That was before the parallel worlding and the ghost. He said, is there anybody who will maybe take dictation from me? So Carolyn offered it first. And but we never got to that stage because things moved and changed. He got distracted by the parallel worlding. Then he got distracted by the ghosts, and then all of a sudden it was March. But the very first thing that JW was changed to us, he became a different person, was this guy who had to write books. He didn't say what the ideas were, but he just said, I got all these ideas, I got to write them out. I see that as Ion pressing in on him, being around him the previous year.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Have you heard me say that before? I've spelled this out before. Have you heard it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And, in retrospect, we show up in almost a year before in Maui. And definitely it was a big, fun, relaxing place to be. So we were like transported to utopia vibrationally right in the middle before Ion showed up. I consider that part of the ionic effect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then Ion says that I started parallel worlding to Maui in 2005 and 6 and figuring out that I wanted to get here. And Ion said that I was coming here, a couple years before, setting it up, rehearsing it or something, and then it came through other means on the secular level, but that's what Ion was saying we were doing. I guess I wanted to get out of New York earlier than 2007, or was planning to. I remember always thinking, there's nowhere else to go. New York's the best place. Not a great place, but what else is better? But as the first half of the naughty knots unfolded, more and more people were on their computers. So what was the point of being in New York? Nobody was out in the streets anymore, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody was on their computer.
Yeah.
So by 2005, I'm pretty sure I realized, what's the point of being here for culture when that old chemical body culture doesn't apply anymore? So that's probably when I started trying to figure out where to go. I certainly consciously ever thought of going to Hawaii. I thought it was a remote place or something, or just had been there a couple of times, but it was not even a place to consider, and I think a lot of people still have that. They say, well, what's it like being isolated out there, 2,500 miles away? But they forget that you're not isolated with your iPhone, and everybody's on the iPhone. That's where the culture is, so you can't Hawaii is not a physical place like that anymore. Not isolated. So why not be in the best environment? for your chemical body. So I must have been working on figuring out where to go. I remember thinking about, well, where else is there to go, you know. I couldn't think of any place. And especially New York was getting a bit of a downer because people weren't recovering from 9/11. They weren't feeling better. Basically, there was a malaise over New York City, especially people who lived there for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So since I live ahead of myself, I must have been working furiously to get out of there from September 12th, 2001. Probably the day after 9/11, I was starting to figure, well, this has been done. To figure out some other situation. I successfully blew up fucking New York. Now what do I do? Is that all there is? I didn't even get any credit for it. Don't even notice. They're talking about some Bob Layden. No, it's not Bob Layden. And then they make a movie on City Island, and at the very end is the very beach we watched it happening from.
Wow.
City Island movie with, I think it's Andy Garcia and Julie Margulies, who's on the cover of some magazine in the airport on Monday. It's a new beauty. She's 49.
Oh.
You know, she's the good wife in that TV show.
Yeah.
So here we are again, sitting back as Bob reminisces of his victory over all of humanity. So, agnostic, without being a Gnostic. So we better get back into our homework.
We're always on duty. That was also part of lore. It was very nice.
We're always what? What'd you say? We're always busy?
On duty.
Yes, we're always on duty. So any other things to say, Bert? I've explained it all perfectly, right?
Yes. It's something to go back and listen to because it was really, actually the last hour or 2 hours, a lot of things you were laying out.
Yeah.
Were like new versions of understanding of Bob.
Of the doctrine of analogical proportionality. See, it's not proportionality, it's analogical proportionality. It's like mathematics as metaphor.
Yeah. I have the impression that even you are getting what you're saying.
Yes,
right.
I do get it. I was just going to say, I wish it was recorded how I explained it to Carolyn in 1994. I mean, I remember saying, wow, that really was easy, and I don't know if I ever... It's a simple thing. Is you're looking at this world from the other world, but at the same time, you're looking at the other world from this world. So you're going both directions. So I'm looking at this world from the other world, and simultaneously in the other world looking at this world. That's you're neither here nor there, and you can see that's the way it is once you're electrified. You're on the telephone. You're here. You're not here. You're not there. You're somewhere else that can't be visualized. Well, you can't visualize being outside of this world yet outside of the other world too, without making it a triangle. But maybe Ion does add an important point of the triangulation of it. So that wasn't accurate for me to say not being the triangle, but who knows? That's we need Ion to judge that paper, mark that paper. So okay, so you're here and you're not. So the statement, I'm in this world but not of it, that's only half the equation. That's A is to B, but you're also C is to D. I'm in the of world but not of it. Like I'm in this world but not of it, but you also have to be in the other world, because people will tend to make the other world the more important world, but the more important world is less than this world in the reverse perspective. So when you say, I'm in this world but not of it, that implies this world is limited, and I've got somewhere else to go. But the tactile position is, I'm not going anywhere else, and that world that I was looking at this world from, I'm looking at that, and I'm not in that world either. So that's exactly the ascended eternal position. You're in the physical, not identifying with it, but you're not running off to some place. You're not trying to kill yourself. So that was a good section. Mark that. What I just said the last 2 minutes was pretty good.
Very good.
Can you visualize that? You know, that saying, I'm in this world but not of it, is only half the story.
Yes.
And if you lock into visual space and book images, you'll get stuck on that one side of the image of in this world but not of it. That's schizophrenia. That's the effect of literacy. It makes you in this world but not of it. But then the other senses make the visual bias become a metaphor from another position, which is not a position. It's like the interplay of ear space and eye space. But as McLuhan says, they are incompatible but commensurable. Incompatible but commensurable. So the yin-yang is only half the image you want. Yin-yang is not a good image. That's just one side of the complementariness factor. See, so what I'm saying sounds good, but it's very hard to replay that, or to, unless you say exactly what I'm saying, it would be hard to paint that. But more and more our modern media does have that ability to X-ray and switch around, you know, just be all over the place rapidly. So the Android meme is expressing tactility more and more in a hypnotic or a seductive manner. It's all the loop-de-loops in a video. Loop-de-loop would still be motion, but it would be jumping from one side to another. Okay? The lesson is done. Much insights have been acquired. You will not tolerate.
Well, Ion talks about loops too.
Any more? What?
Ion has spoken about looping.
Yes. What was today's looping? We heard on the rewrite looping was, there was a new idea about. What did you say?
There are rings. Well, not. I didn't hear 40, but I think it's in 39 and 38. You gave a, as you mentioned, that it looks like ring 7 loops with ring 12, and Ion.
Oh yeah, they pair off. But Ion said something. Yeah, the looping of the diagram rings is related to the torsion fields. That's what I wanted to say. The looping is what Ion says a torsion field is.
That was in 40, but you just played earlier?
Yeah, well, we
played that earlier.
But you didn't. Yeah, you haven't heard it, right, Bert? You haven't heard it yet.
No.
Yeah, so there's some good stuff in this one. Right, guys? Wasn't this a good session? There were several people posting, wow, this is amazing. Jordan.
Yeah, this is good. You
I think
had...
Alyssa was dumbfounded. Alyssa was dumbfounded 90% of the
Oh, yeah.
Right?
No, not dumbfounded. But you...
Yeah, you were getting it. You were excited at the insight.
Yeah. It's great. You had me write down 204.56.
That's where what? I mean, that's where we're going to start.
That's where you left off. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. But we're not going to do that right now. We got to do McLuhan
later.
And then we're going to do Zappa. And who knows? You know, I posted on different places. Okay, we did our first Zappa hour, and it's 7 hours long. Nobody's talked that long about Frank in a public setting.
But wait, the other looping that was done, it was on 39, was talking about because of the new Chi, there's not going to be any looping any longer. No more looping.
Right. No
yeah,
cycle.
That's right.
No nothing.
Right, no cycle.
No movement.
Right. What was the reason for that? What was that? What was the reason there was no more cycle? Or
because
Pi is not in infinity. There's a fixed number of Pi.
That's duration. Alyssa, that's duration. That's time. It takes time to go through a cycle, but there's no time at all for any kind of duration that would make a cycle.
So wait, but isn't frequency a loop?
See, look at their minds. Hey, look at her mind is resisting, grabbing for anything.
I think vibration would be like a loop.
What'd you say, Roxy? Loop-de-loop? What?
No, the vibration, the cycle of one.
Right. Well, that could be.
Like a cycle, but the vibration is not a loop. It's like a flow.
So there are no frequencies. Because you're right, Alyssa, there is a time factor in a frequency or a duration or a sine wave, right? So there's not even those. Well,
that's what I'm wondering. That's what I'm wondering.
Well, you don't need to wonder. It's a fact. It's done. You've got it.
But I feel like IM is bringing in the non-looping reality of frequency.
Yes, but that would be a different frequency, not linear duration frequency. It would be, say, tactile, acoustic, tactile resonance.
Right.
But it go beyond that. It is indifference to any form of communication or connecting and making your own situation.
Yeah, frequency is rate.
Yeah. That's what Zappa says. He talks about rates in the Bob Marshall interview. He does a lot of talking about rates.
Oh, yeah. Where can I hear that?
You can't hear it. It's not public, but there is a part. I'll have to, in the second installment of Who's Forgotten Furry Lind, I featured some of it. Not perfect audio, but you can hear it. I should excerpt that and post it at some point.
I think that was one of the best interviews ever. That was one of the best interviews ever made to Zappa.
When did you read it? Did you ever read it? I assume you did. And when did you read it the first time? Years ago?
Well, when we met, you sent me. No, you Skyped me, and you were with Bob Marshall in Toronto and Dave.
Yes, yeah.
And then you talk about that interview, and then you send me.
And so you got it after it was there. So you hadn't read it before. So you found that you would say it was a.
Well, there are some
read it?
Arts that had been there quoted a lot, like.
Right.
But I didn't know.
When you read it, did you get a big insight? Did you get a big enlightenment from reading it?
Yes, because it's not only about the music. It's really going beyond.
The first question is, what is music? And that opened him to be beyond technical musician. He could go beyond that. You know what I mean? I was not. It's like saying, "You're not just a musician, are you?" Kind of question.
Yeah, that's a good way to show it.
Yeah.
To ask like that, you're not just that.
Yeah, because it's this famous poem. You know, what is it? Information is not knowledge. Knowledge is not wisdom. Wisdom is not truth. Truth is not beauty. Beauty is not something, and something is not
love.
Yeah, and then he switches, and he just goes, music is the best. So he's canceled out everything with all these valued words. So what is music? What is this thing?
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's not beauty, truth, knowledge, information, love, or whatever other words are.
Yes, I can tell you very specifically what it is.
What was that? That's a demiurge, the Gnostic demiurge who runs our lives. But no, it's perfect. He cancels everything. So what is he referring to when he says music is the best? What is music? And no one would ever ask him that, but we did. And we were rewarded substantially.
And you can hear everything on your timeline.
Everything he was doing. Also the speech. Also the speech for him was part of his composition. Everything he was doing, to say, even this interview is part of the big work. So he was aware that his music was not only the music with instruments, but also what he was talking about and all his performances. And
music
is the conversation.
You know what he meant by music? He meant ascension, as Ein describes it, because it cancels out all the high values, and it's the best, and it's living a good, full situation. That's music. So
yes, I think it's the engaging the frequencies, engaging the conversation with the big note, which will be the higher, non-physical.
Right. And you hear Gail occasionally saying, nobody knew that Frank had all these other levels of ideas. And I think the Evergreen said to me that there was very profound physics in Zappa's ideas. In other words, he was like LaRouche or McLuhan. He was studying all topics, making a synthesis, including scientific concepts of matter and all the stuff, which is what I was always working on myself. So then she says, so when I was with her a year ago, I said, you get these ideas? No. Do you get ideas? No, they say it. Are you interested in the ideas that Frank's referring to that nobody knows about? And she goes, yes. And do you know any of them? And she says, yes. And then when we got interrupted, the other guy distracted, but I was confronting her to talk about that level. Because there's several people I know who tried to, she hired to make books, to do a book on Frank. And they all got bogged down talking to her, and she would try to control it or claim that Frank got his ideas from her. She had a lot of weird attitudes to these authors, and there's a whole bunch of them. They all dropped off. They couldn't do it with Gail. So I was trying to see if I could interested her in talking about it. But the meeting was too short, and I didn't know she was sick, She didn't have the energy really to pursue it. But that's what I was trying to say.
One of the things that attracted you to Zappa was not only
Roxy, before you say that, Roxy, I want to finish what I was saying. Listen to this. One of the authors told me that she considered that she understood Frank more than anybody and had conversations with him. So I tried to say to her, okay, so you're the world expert on Zappa, and are you interested in ideas about it? And which was a stupid way of saying it. And she said, yeah, of course. And then I tried to do it, but we got interrupted. Now, she says in this interview in the Rolling Stone, 2 months before she died, she says, we are going to make a great documentary, and it's going to show all those experts, those Zappa experts who think they understand Frank. We're going to show how they're all wrong. And she says, they all hate me. And she talked about those guys. All these guys hate me. But we're going to show them, and we're going to give the finger to all the experts. Now, that's what I've been doing all along with my idiosyncratic interpretation of Zappa. So I was thinking I might be the last guy she could work with. I don't know when they started the video, but this was just a project. And I wondered if she would be interested in the ionic part, because she did claim a few years ago that she was psychic and that her oracular ability was coming back. So she had quite a megalomania, quote, megalomania, or Illuminati bitch opinion. And then it comes out a few weeks after she died. Listen to this. What? Were you laughing?
I'm laughing at Illuminati bitch.
Right. And then it comes out a couple weeks after she died. Ahmed says his uncle told him that Gail worked for the CIA or worked with the CIA or did something for the CIA and saved the world. Now, that's the ultimate megalomaniac Illuminati bitch statement you could make. So it's very interesting that she has this interview, very excited about the documentary that they're going to do. It's going to come out in 2017. They say they got miles of Zappa interviews that nobody's ever heard because TV stations would come over for a 30-second soundbite, and they'd end up talking to him for 2 hours, record it all, and give him a copy. So she said there's an astounding amount of stuff people haven't heard Frank talk about. So she's looking forward to that coming out. Well, she didn't stick around to be here. It's gone. So that leaves us the job of interpreting all the new stuff that's going to come out. And we already know.
What I wanted to say is that I can see that you were attracted to Zappa not only for the great music, but because you could see the whole album. Like he was talking about the whole work. And as other persons were trying to get Joyce and McLuhan, and nobody got them like you do. Nobody got Zappa also like you already saw what he was doing, that he was not only composing, he was working to change the environment.
Yeah, so he writes an article for Life magazine in 1968, last week in June 28th or something, 1968, and it's titled, "The Oracle Has It All Psyched Out." Now, did Life put that title there, making fun of the explanatory breadth of Zappa's article, or did Zappa put it there? I took it as Zappa put it there, because a couple of years before that, McLuhan was called the Oracle of Electronic Age. So when you start using the word Oracle, and I was interacting with cosmic awareness, that triggered me as the right word to get Bob's attention. You know what I mean? So the Oracle has it all psyched out. It could even be Zappa commenting on a person like McLuhan. So that was a key word that turned me on to that we had similar interests. See what I mean?
What was your first experience with Zappa? Did you hear him talk or his music?
That's in the diary. That's in 1958. I remember I was sent over by the Secret Council of 10 to look into UFOs. There was a lot of UFO activity in California. There was several cults, and George Adamski and a bunch of other guys. And we always were monitoring what was going on, what could be a new form of knowledge or information. So I was sent over to see what was going on in the Mojave Desert, which is where Lancaster was, where Frank was living. And I was in a nightclub in that area, and Bo Diddley was playing, and I was always curious about American pop music because I was behind in knowing about it. You know, I didn't get any of it in France in my early years, so I was always playing catch-up and interested in it. And I heard at some quiet point, I heard two voices, one going fast and bulbous, and the other went tight and tapered. So I looked over, and there were these two young guys, and they looked pretty interesting. So I went over and just talked with them a little bit, not much. It was much like meeting Stang and Follow Drummond in 1978. But I talked with them longer in 78 and then came back the next day, and we talked some more. But so I established some acquaintance or not even that superficial contact with them. And then through the next couple of years, I kept bumping into Frank more than Don. And you will see the subsequent diary replays of the conversations we had. That's in my diaries. It's in, chronological order. You can read what I said. But Beefheart ends up in Trump Mass Replica in 1969. The album comes out, and there's the phrase, fast and bulbous and tight and tapered. He had them in his poetry. So it was some kind of a code or signified something to he and Don. Fast and bulbous, that's like one, that would be sort of like an ecstatic. Well, it depends. Tight and tapered is maybe horizontal and like a cone. So you got tight and tapered. That would be the controlled interpretation of meaning, and fast and bulbous would be the overwhelming. So fast and bulbous would be the ear, and tight and tapered would be the eye. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get the occult symbolism there?
Yeah.
I think the phrase, "Do you see what I'm saying?" is kind of funny.
Yes.
Yes.
No, I have that habit. And like Beeford always said, I think it was Beeford always said, "Do you know what I mean? You know what I mean?" That's what he always said. I always say, "Do you see what I'm saying?" is a good tactile statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
And signals for the blind.
Yeah.
So that's my opening gambit with them. So again, I was always thousands of years ahead of myself, interacting with holograms of what would be significant 30, 40 years later. You know what I mean? By interacting with those two when they were young. I mean,
very young. He was 17 in 1958.
Well, it depends. He would become 18 in December
21st.
Yeah, so he would be he'd be 17, yes, in the summer, whenever it was I met him. It was in the middle of the year.
Right.
I'm pretty sure. So the thing is that if I'm a subset of the guy who mapped out the 20th century in 1911, then I was a robot for that guy. And I was meant to meet, I've been on duty going through this tunnel vision or being in this tunnel of fate for 60 years. And I'm a programmed, probe of the 1911 guy, right? Who's then a subset of Ophanel. Obab.
Obab.
Yeah. So I see. Yes, it's amazing. Who said that? Which young lady said that?
Leslie. Not so young.
Oh, Leslie, right.
Yeah.
But it's interesting looking at the predestined, never a day without something relevant to what was going to unfold happening. That's the way I look back the last 50 years. Then I can understand it, where Ion says you live ahead of yourself. So the programming of a living ahead of myself was done by the 1911 guy, who's a subset of a larger programming by Ophanel. So I'm sitting there by this Christian say, yeah, well, I gave the clay tablets to Moses. I said, you're coming to Maui. I recommend you go to the shops at Wailea Mall. They have amazing ice cream there called Lappert's. Then there's a pause, and you go, yeah. And I said, that's what I was eating when I gave Moses the tablets. But see, it was like a dog whistle. He couldn't hear my voice. He couldn't hear it.
Couldn't take it in.
UFO. He had a UFO experience on American Airlines flight something.
He didn't respond at all?
No, he kept talking about himself. I mean, he was full of himself. He was sort of an okay guy, but as a matter of fact, when after many hours, I had to go stand in the back by the bathroom just to stand up, so I stood up for 2 hours. When I came back to my seat, there he was haranguing another person talking. He was standing up, talking down, and somebody in the seat going on and on and on and on. The guy was a neurotic communicator, couldn't stop talking. So I'm sure I see that. Well, that was a meaningful experience, I was stuck with the guy. I got spit in my face while he babbled, but I took it like a soldier of what? Of Ion? A soldier of Orion? Or Ion? There it is, Ion or Ion. Orion in Blade Runner?
Yes.
I've stood on the shoulders of Orion and seen battleships that would quake your boots. Something like that, says the robot to the scientist in Blade Runner. Right? We could probably get that off YouTube. I got to get that. anyways, I took it like the baseball bat I am, and did my communication to his labyrinth of his mind. It probably saved many things, because this guy, as we were saying to who knew about ADT? Kim works with ADT, right? She knew about the wiring company, and they wire the whole world. So I was talking to this guy who worked for the Global Wired. He's probably a Moses. One of Moses' selves. That's what he was. Let's exaggerate the meaning to make more patterns. So Moses, he had to talk to me. He had to talk to me before this important week of whatever happened this week. Yeah, there were some important things happened. So he disguised himself as a beef ball, an abandoned creeping meatball. And that's why at the end he suddenly switched and said, I'm going to look up everything you fucking said, buddy. I'm going to Google it all. See, he'll look up Marshall McLuhan. He wrote down Marshall McLuhan. He'll look up Marshall McLuhan, and then he'll get Dobbs, archivist, and then he'll look up Dobbs, and he'll get Bob Neverett, and he's probably dead in his motel room right now with some old Ion show going on over and over and over. What'd you say, Bert?
I said, did he actually say he was going to look up some of the things you're saying, or he didn't get a chance?
Yes, he wrote down Marshall McLuhan, and that's all he wrote down was Marshall McLuhan. And but what he said, he didn't say, I'm going to Google Marshall McLuhan. He said, I'm going to Google all these things that you've been talking about. But he'd been doing all the talking. So he was a spy. Damn fucking spy. Working for the Bolsheviks of the Pentagon. And he's trying to see what Bob had to say. He probably had a wire on him. He got it all on tape. They're listening now to me talk about it to see what I thought of what happened, to see how much I knew. Right now, they're listening.
Maybe it was a plant from the 418 group, Bob.
Yes. If we talked to Ion, Jesus Christ, you know it would be some crazy scenario. Well, Bob, that was yourself. That actually was Ophenel. That was Ophenel. You made Ophenel be, Bob. That was you. That's what you say. This is a pretty unique form of entertainment when you have Ion to give you all these advanced ideas of how to reinterpret things, right? That's what makes this entertaining, this monologue by me.
No, I think it's fascinating to understand what's going on and what happened before, all these things linking together.
Yeah, it's interesting to note what Carolyn ignores. She knew that she didn't even look at the guy. She just knew, I'm glad I'm on the other side. Listen, that's fucking idiot. But she missed out that it was Ophenel. I'm going to tell her that tomorrow when she gets out. Turns out it was Ophenel, Carolyn. You blew it again. You're now still working for me. You know, one of these days you're going to fucking pay attention to my world so you can dominate it, take it over, and then you won't be working for me anymore. You're working for yourself. As long as she ignores the true knowledge, the complete Bob knowledge, he just becomes a mere appendage. That'll be fun when she hears this, like, next Thursday. When she's listening to the archives, I'll be upstairs. I hear this big hoot and laughter going on, and she'll be enjoying it because it was all done for her pleasure, her entertainment. If you notice she's laughing, she laughs. Maybe that's why you like it. She's laughing at something more than what's obvious. I think maybe that's what's neat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She knows more of what I'm referring to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she's flabbergasted that I'm admitting so much or telling things that if you were JW Ion, you'd know what I was referring to. Like, that's partly what she's like. So she's actually pretty lucky. She's got her own entertainment. as a husband, right?
Hey, Bob, do you remember the rewrite, I don't know, from last week or maybe the week before, where Ion brings in Carolyn and then you tried to block her from coming in because she wouldn't, she would slow down or block the knowing or something, and block our groping, I think is what you said.
Yeah, groping. It was groping.
Yeah, the groping.
I was blocking Ion groping Carolyn? Is that what you mean?
Well, no. Well, he wanted her to come in to have her clarify or to ask specific questions to, and then you tried to block Carolyn from coming in and talking because...
How did I do that?
You didn't succeed. But you were saying how all she would do is just not know and block our groping or stop our groping.
Our probing.
No, you said groping.
Okay, tactile.
And then
maybe I saw.
Then it was great. Huge laughter from both her and Ion about groping. Like,
right. Well, that's what's going on in tactile.
Bob likes to grope.
But I'm thinking that I was objecting to Ion bringing her in and distracting from what we were trying to stay focused on. I was suspicious of his intervention with Carol.
Oh, okay. I didn't quite. She turned it into you'd rather grope rather than get to the point and get to the meat of the matter. And Bob prefers to grope.
That's true.
And then of course Ion said, "No, I want to grope Carolyn." Or we want to grope Carolyn.
Right. But this is a modern form of Burns and Allen. It's a modern form of entertainment. There's a subset where we're a comedy team, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
A very subtle, avant-garde, multi-leveled, befuddle the Church of Subgenius comedy team. Without even trying. It's funny just having the ionic reality. That's what's funny,
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't know what's going to be on the second half of this rewrite number 40. We don't know where it's going to go. I have no way. So, I think I'll play some music and then let's do McLuhan. Right? We do that for a while.
Right,
yes.
And then we'll do Zappa. Okay, so let me play some music just for a minute because I got to do something else. Shoot, no, we can do that. Anybody got a request? Oh,
Sons
look,
of Orange County.
Alyssa. See, Alyssa, I don't look enough at the chat room, but I see you posted the poem, Zappa's Statement.
So did Lady Ohm.
Yeah.
Lady Ohm. Yeah, information is, and it's very accurate. Information is the constant data people have swirling around them. Then they try to make patterns out of it, and that's knowledge, right? So information is not knowledge. They listen to the experts to get the knowledge pattern about the information whirlpool. But knowledge is not wisdom, because knowledge would just be practical and relate to the issues of the day, so it's limited. But wisdom is not truth. And then truth is not beauty. McLuhan has said that. Beauty is not love. And then he says love is not music. Then music is the best. It's a pretty good poem.
Food for thought.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so what do we play? Don't you love this? I just want to play a second of this. Don't you love this beginning? Who is it? I kept repeating it. This. See, that's an Ian. We've heard Ian saying, "Don't you know? This is the sound showing. This is the music slows down speech." So it turned an ionic statement, "Don't you know?" into an operatic that has Puccini in the brackets. You get what I'm saying? This is. Don't you know? Hey, Roxy, I figured it out. You were asking, talking about Zappa. Having essentially absurd. And so we can say we're a comedy group, I and them or Carol and I, but you can't be just standing there trying to make jokes all the time. You have to get into the process of understanding the drama of cognition, which will renew your sense of weirdness, and that's what you're laughing about. So we've got the information to move it into a serious mind talk with Ion that creates the antidote or ground for more humor. Right? Get that?
Right.
Yes.
So comedians, they're boring because they come on and joke. They should take a break from whatever jokes they're telling in Las Vegas and then just start explaining the five bodies or Thomas' doctrine of heterological personality. You go serious.
McLuhan and Joyce.
Yeah. And then after a few minutes, you can then shift into a joke that comes out of it. But our humor comes out of the absurdity of the ideas that your mind is entertaining. The new ideas. That's where the humor comes from. Very organic.
That's what Zappa was doing in his concerts. He will do these parodies of romantic songs or whatever, rock and roll and
whatever was going on in the audience.
Yes, and then he will go real complex in his music. But he will just take a break and do these funny things, and then he will just fly.
Yeah, so he said that
he will make a solo amazing.
Right. And he would say he would play, you build up tension through dissonance, and then you bring in consonance to relieve the tension. So that simple little dialectic, like Leslie saying, "I'm in this world but not of it," that expands into all the multiple ways he's doing it. So look how he introduces Edgar Varese. So he's going to do an Edgar Varese song. This is what he says.